meeting on the air, please? Thank you.
You're there.
If you could please join me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schofield, what do you have us
First
for us
thing
today?
is we're going to do Employee of the Month first. And this month's Employee of the Month is Danielle Zambruski. And she has been with us a long time. She does a lot of things really, really well, incredibly well. One of the near impossible tasks she has, though, is keeping Mr. De La Vega.
I try. I do try.
Trouble. But this is, we'll let Ed, you.
Yeah, normally I would wing this, but her bio is so impressive, I'm going to have to do some reading here, so apologies. Danielle began her career with the Village of Wellington in 2005 as an administrative assistant. She received several promotions and held many titles since her date of hire, including project management assistant, accounting technician, procurement agent, purchasing supervisor, senior administrative assistant, and finally, purchasing manager. Danielle holds both Certified Public Procurement Buyer and Certified Public Procurement Officer certifications. She was instrumental in the village achieving the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing Outstanding Agency Achievement Award, only one of 2 municipalities in the county with such accreditation. In addition, last year she was selected to participate in Well Up leadership training as one of the village's up-and-coming leaders. Danielle plays a critical role not only in everyday purchasing, but also in reconciling expenses with FEMA. To date, Danielle has recovered millions of dollars in disaster-related expenses from FEMA. When Danielle is not working on recovering money from FEMA, reviewing bid documents, or attending bid openings, she is furiously working on implementing the village's new ERP system. Danielle's favorite quote is, "I did not make the rules, I just make sure you follow them." It is for these reasons and more that Danielle Zambruski is December's Employee of the Month. Danielle.
And she had to write that for Ed.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate being recognized. I do have this side of the table right here that is supportive with me all the time, including Mr. Schofield and Lori. Although I don't end up
Your task is just getting tougher as you add the people on.
I don't end up in Paul's office as much, so they keep me out of his office. But I do appreciate it. I have a great team I work with in finance. ERP was a big task. We did go live February 1st. Everything is moving along, a little bumps, but we were getting through them. And yeah, we have a great team up there in finance. My staff in purchasing is working hard to get this software going. But yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Great
and
job.
this is quite difficult. I mean, to us, we go, oh, purchasing, that sounds like you shop a lot. But once you spend some time in government, you realize how intricate the procedures are and everything that you have to do to check the boxes off and do it well. So we thank you for that. We know it's a big job. It's not just shopping. So
Super complicated, yeah.
And on top of that, you volunteer a lot in the community, and we really appreciate that. We like to see that, and all of our team players really do that. We have quite a bit of significant contribution to the community, but I know that you do personally, and I appreciate that because it means a lot to the people around us, not just that you work here, but that you volunteer here and play well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
And you got to smile about this. It looked like you were being walked down the plank or something. You know?
She has to work with Ed.
Well, the rest of the time you can frown, but while you're here,
This is
Really
good. This
come
is
to
good.
find out why they don't let her in my office very much is Ed's afraid she'll tell me what's really happening down there.
yes, we don't like to hear that sort of thing
No.
on the air, Paul.
He was just kidding.
No, we know that,
Just kidding.
and you guys are very professional. I want to make sure that people don't misunderstand because you're a very professional staff, and it is quite. I'm not even making that up. It's quite intricate the way the procedures have to be followed, the laws that have to be done, the way things have to be noticed, and I just appreciate the great work that you do. But we can joke around.
We can.
Nobody wants to go to your office, Paul. Not even me sometimes.
I'm not sure how to take that. Can we move on with the agenda, please?
Please do.
There are no
Rescue me.
presentations and proclamations.
Really?
So let's go then into the consent agenda, and I believe I'm going to get a request to remove the master plan once we get to it.
I had a couple of typos that I found in the minutes. Back to my old self and reading through them, and I found a couple typos, but I'm going to get those to the clerk's office, so.
Ms. Newman will be happy to make any additions, corrections, or deletions that you like.
Okay, and then after the minutes, we had Project Grad.
Yeah, and every year we provide a contribution of $500 to each of the high schools. And then we also make Village Park Gym available through the interlocal agreement. So we're just asking for the authority to make the grant and then make the school and the facilities available under the interlocal. That's a yes.
And these are both high schools.
Both high schools,
right? And
Wellington
are they going to
and
be
Public
here?
Church.
Is anyone going to be here to accept that, or?
Generally, from the consent, they don't. If they are,
Okay.
well,
No,
if
that's
they
fine.
are, I'll pull it.
How long have we, it's been $500 for how long?
Not for as long as I've been the village manager, so at
long
least
as I
10
can
years,
remember.
11 years.
Which my question is with inflation and everything, should we be upping that a little? 750 or 1,000, or, I mean, just,
Well, we make a significant contribution on top of this by providing the facility. So I don't think this really carries much of the project. How much do they usually need, Tanya, since I know you've done this a time or two?
Most recently.
Yeah, it's a big
Well,
number.
they're both different. I mean,
Right,
it
but
could
it's a
be-
big number.
it's a big- I
Thousands
mean-
of dollars.
Oh, yeah, like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Because you get as much as you can donated, but they could definitely put additional money to good use. I wouldn't,
Also stores.
object to that. But yeah, they need a lot of money it's a lot of kids, and they're keeping them safe off the streets, keeping them entertained for the evening. It's a
Right.
big job.
Well, it's worthy, but
Yeah. We provide the staffing in the gyms and a lot of things for them. This is one of those times that I happily get to say, though, if council would like that number to be bigger, I'm certain that we can find a way to do it. But it is
well, I'm not,
$500
I'm
is the
not talking
smallest part of
about,
the contribution.
I'm not talking about dramatically bigger. I'm saying I didn't think we had upped that number in many years.
It's been the same for, actually, since we started officially making it a yearly basis where they didn't have to come and actually sing for their supper. It's been that same amount.
And how
And-
much time is that?
Expression.
It's going to be
Says here
10 years.
Says here 14 plus.
Yeah, I'm saying, but 10 years since we officially didn't have them come in every year where it was like a new thing, probably about 10 years.
well,
Kinda like
this
when I
is
was
an
little.
off year too, because there's no elections this year. So
There's-
I will mention that because sometimes candidates, when they have leftover funds and they have to distribute them, project graduation is a really good way to do that. So I would just suggest if we want to do more than that, that maybe we do that personally, because this has already been established and set aside. But, I mean, we can, if we want to give more, we can, but I'd rather see us make that commitment personally if we want to do that than change the village procedure at this point.
Reading the book last night, that was just a thought that I just wanted to know how long this was and if we thought we should adjust for inflation in
Well,
any
it's
way. It's
certainly
not a big
worthy.
deal for me
It's
either
a
way.
very important thing, and I know that I've always, if I had campaign funds, I always made sure that I distributed them evenly between the high schools, but I know there's a lot of community input that they get from the fundraising. So there's, part of it is a really good outreach for the community to know what's happening and to be able to contribute. I guess if they have some kind of a shortfall, maybe they could let us know.
Okay. All right, the next item is ratification of an emergency purchase to replace all aerator number 1 impellers and approve the resolution 2019-08 amending the utility fund maintenance budget for fiscal year 2018 and 19 by allocating fund balance for the replacement of aerator number 1. What this is that they've begun experiencing some problems in terms of efficiency with the aerators. They were installed 25 years ago. The purchase order has been issued, they've not been delivered, and we can do that. We do occasionally issue emergency orders, but I am required by council to come and get approval from you. But they're actually experiencing some loss in being able to process equipment, wastewater. So the money is there in the account. We do need to move it from one to the other, but this is something that absolutely needs to be done to keep the plant operating where it's supposed to be. And at 25 years old, that's a long time for impellers.
That was my question. Is there a life span
I think this
on
is
these?
beyond its expected life.
Okay, so this
and-
isn't,
Yeah, it's beyond its expected life, and basically, it's critical to the operation. It's a biological process. The aeration basin gets oxygen in there to kind of get the biological process going. And so aeration basin number 1 is not operating until we get this completed. So while we have the ability to keep going, we can't keep going forever without this basin in operation.
so we're replacing 2 or 1?
It's however many
Okay.
Aeration
impellers
basin
are there
number
in
1.
basin number
Okay,
1.
however many there are.
And it's
So
not
there-
something until it starts to fail that you know it's going to fail. So
well, it said
That's
it
why
was
it becomes an
not.
emergency, because once it
Yeah.
fails, it fails, and then
when
suddenly it becomes a
fails,
problem.
it fails.
How do we know it won't exceed $150,000?
We actually have the proposal from the vendor. It's just at this point, we put some contingency in there, depending upon when we actually go in, that we might find some unforeseen conditions, but I feel pretty comfortable this would be the amount. It won't exceed this amount.
Well, I'm assuming that maybe while they're in there doing them, they're just going to do them all too, because it seems like it would be a bit of
Well,
work.
in aeration basin number 1, correct.
Right, okay,
Mhm.
okay. Very well. All right, no questions beyond that? All right.
All right, next item is authorization to order contract to provide a Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and I believe this is the one that we're going to,
Yes.
we're going to ask to have this pulled and put on as item 8B.
Okay.
So, Mr. Barnes, Mr. De La Vega, you want to take us through this while we're here?
Sure, we can do that. And I'll also ask Mr. Juckett to come up and join us. That way he's available for any play-by-play or local color that we might need to add on to the presentation as well. So the Parks and Rec Master Plan is an item that came before you the last time for the authorization to negotiate a contract with the highest-ranked firm, AECOM, that we had issued a request for proposals previously. And Mr. De La Vega can give some details on the actual value of the proposal that we have approved with the corresponding timeframes, and then we can go into some detail on the actual scope of services that's included in there.
Yes, so we released the RFQ back in September, and then we came back to before you guys for authorization to negotiate with the highest-ranked firm, AECOM. We did negotiate with them. There was an initial proposal that was provided by AECOM for $177,000. We went back and forth regarding scope and fee, and we have been able to get a reduction down to $149,772.48. So we were able to reduce it approximately $27,000. The budgeted amount for this project is $176,000. So we're now well below our budgeted amount for the project.
Generally, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan kind of takes main things into consideration. Your physical facilities that you actually have and your complement of recreation facilities, parks, all the different improvements in the public realm, trails, that type of thing, active facilities, passive facilities, neighborhood parks, playgrounds, et cetera. But it also looks at those existing facilities, and it looks at your programs and services offered within the Parks and Recreation Department, within the village, and tries to take a baseline where you're currently at, programs, services, facilities, and looks at the context of the entire community that you're serving, and trying to determine then, based on what the community's long-range needs are, what the community's long-range wants and desires are, trying to come to some middle ground to achieve that based on your existing facilities and what you can look to actually try and address going forward in the future. A lot of times, the Parks and Rec Master Plan serves as the basis for your long-range capital improvement programming that ends up your year-to-year, in addition to your traditional, we'll say, capital maintenance improvements that are required of existing facilities based on service life, et cetera. It also looks at then, should, through the master planning process, needs be identified, that's how it's factored into a long-range capital improvement plan for those athletic facilities. Because one of the things that the master plan will also look at is, again, in addition to the community context, needs, et cetera, it'll look at national trends, it'll look at state trends to try and determine, okay, 10 years ago, we probably would not, or 15 years ago, we would not have been talking about pickleball as much as we are now. Similarly,
Free lessons, 9 a.m.
exactly. But
Wednesday morning.
similarly, 15, 20 years ago, roller hockey was going nuts. In the late 90s, roller hockey was such an explosive sport that we built 2 roller hockey rinks at Village Park as part of the initial phases of construction, and actually had one covered. Nowadays, roller hockey isn't that a big user of the facilities, only because the numbers in the sport have dwindled. One of the recent trends we're seeing is the number in tackle football dwindling for a lot of different reasons, primarily, head trauma being the biggest concern. But, years ago, it wasn't that case. So there are cycles that programs go through, that sports go through, that activities go through. And in addition to that, you've got kind of not your traditional stick and ball activities that still are part of Parks and Rec services that also have to be considered, whether it's drop-in programming for teens, whether it's drop-in programming for hard-to-reach age groups or hard-to-reach demographics. Those kinds of things are all going to be considered within not only the local context, but also the larger context of what's happening elsewhere outside Wellington and Palm Beach County in the state and nationally. But, it also considers the physical facilities, how it ties into maintenance and maintenance standards, and how we're comparing to other communities of our size, other communities of our same population, other communities of maybe not the same population, but the same budget. So it benchmarks a lot of the activities and services we provide. So it helps us compare how we do that. And there's a lot of other items that we can kind of address in some questions if you have some. But the other item is that also one thing, Mr. De La Vega touched on it during Ms. Zambruski's the presentation, that, purchasing is accredited by the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing. Our Public Works Department is accredited by the American Public Works Association as an accredited agency, one of only a few in the county. Mr. De La Vega is only one of 2 in the county. Well, one of the first accreditations we received was the Parks and Recreation Department's accreditation with the Commission on Accreditation of Parks and Recreation Agencies, the CAPRA accreditation, and that's also a fairly selective process. And in
What year was that?
It was the first one, and I'm going to say it was right after I left the department. Not that there was any correlation there. So I'm going to say that was like mid-2000s.
Okay, so we update that.
Yeah, this is our second time renewing, so it was about 15 years ago.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's in that process that.
And we've seen value in that, that audit that they do, right?
The accreditation.
We've seen quite a bit of value to us.
Absolutely,
It's not
it's
just
very
a-
in-depth. It's a very in-depth process.
I think the biggest value that we've seen, it's twofold. One is externally, again, helps us compare, benchmark, and basically look at this continuous improvement process, how we compare to other agencies our size, bigger agencies, smaller agencies, not only locally in the state, but again, nationally. But internally, one of the things, the same thing with APWA and the same thing with the purchasing accreditation, is those types of processes that we go through help us really see how well the department works internally, because it doesn't only look at the department. It actually looks at our processes that affect the department in finance, in purchasing, in maintenance, in customer service. So it really addresses all the functions within the village and how it is addressed through the department. So it helps us do that on a more regular basis than probably we normally would. And so far, we've compared relatively or very favorably with other agencies. And we're used as a benchmark and the gold standard for a lot of things.
So this is like that on steroids?
Well, it actually, it's interesting. It's while we were probably, and I think Mr. Webb from ACOM will confirm this, we were probably one of the few, if not the only, accredited agency without a current Parks and Recreation master plan. I think, I'll attribute that to some great staff sales and write-ups and descriptions, and actually a lot of different piecemeal bifurcated processes that we had, that probably the sum of which was equivalent to some Parks and Rec master planning. However, those standards have gotten a little bit more stringent, and at this point, I think we would really need to have a Parks and Rec master plan process ongoing and ultimately approved to be able to maintain our accreditation.
It used to not be required, and now it's a fundamental requirement. So now it's part of the CAPRA process. You must have a Parks master plan.
So, question on chronology. The way I understand this, they're going to prepare a report, present it to the Parks and Rec Board, which I think is a good idea. Then they're going to prepare one for us, which I also think is a good idea. And then I've seen here that there's going to be a visioning workshop that staff is going to coordinate with them. When is that visioning workshop? At the end of their analysis or in the beginning? And if it's in the beginning, why not tie it into our visioning meeting?
Two things. One, I believe it's in the beginning, because those reports are really the culmination of the entire effort, both the analysis and data collection and synthesis of all that information together into recommendations from the consulting team. And those presentations then essentially are the culmination of that initial effort. The visioning is part of really more the needs assessment and where do we go from here? We could certainly tie it in, I think, to the council's visioning. I think the time frame you have is such that probably would have to go longer. And the issue I see with that is that this is going to be fairly specific to Parks and Rec facilities and programs. Whereas I think council's visioning process is usually more far-reaching than that. So I would.
I understand that, but what I mean is when we get to the part where we want to talk as a council as to what our vision is for the future of Parks and Rec, would it not be a good idea to have these folks here present to engage in the discussion with us?
Specific to Parks and Rec, absolutely. I didn't want
There's an
to.
interview process with us too.
Right, there's a
the way
focus group.
Yeah, there's.
Correct.
Individual meetings.
And that's
Right.
fine, individual meetings are fine, but there are often times where you all will say something that I haven't thought of that is worthwhile to then have a whole discussion on, so.
Absolutely.
Back to my point of having a productive visioning session, I think it would be productive to have these guys present, but it's just my take on it. I don't know if you
But-
all feel the same.
Well, looking at this, it seems like they're wanting to get the stakeholders in that visioning. So I would imagine we are stakeholders, so we would very well be involved in this whole day-long process of listening, because this seems to be more than just pickleball or how many soccer fields we want. They are looking at cultural things in the
Correct.
community, and it's going to include a lot of different focus groups. I would think you would have the seniors club talk about the programming they want and the fact that they don't have bocce ball anymore, so and things like that. I mean, everybody's going to have that whole day long thing. I would imagine we would be involved in that process. Is that what you're thinking, Mr. Vice Mayor?
I don't,
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is,
I guess
what is their definition of visioning? Are they talking about they are going to spend an entire day talking about Parks and Rec, or we can have them come in and spend an hour with us during our visioning session talking specifically about Parks and Rec? What is this workshop?
And ultimately, while we weren't planning on it, we can certainly ask Mr. Webb to come up. But before he does, I think one thing I would say is the answer to that question would be neither. I think their idea of visioning, it's a collaborative process, but it's not going to be an hour. It's going to be more than an hour.
It's a day long.
But it's going to, as the mayor mentioned, it's going to involve the different stakeholders and different focus groups. And so it's going to be fairly specific to Parks and Recreation, cultural facilities, what have you. We're not going to be talking about traffic signals on Greenbrier. We're not going to be talking about, the level of service for traffic on South Shore Boulevard. We're going to be talking about Parks and Recreation facilities and related programming, the maintenance of those facilities, everything and anything related to Parks and Recreation, but not the bigger visioning that we traditionally do with council and staff that covers a lot more topics. So I think it can certainly happen, but I would not see it that this would substitute or be a part of that bigger issue. It would maybe feed into it.
So
Is Mr. Webb?
Give him a microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
We'll hear about that if we don't.
I got two of them here. My name is Joe Webb. I'm with the company AECom. I am AECom's Director of Park Planning. I work nationally. Fortunately, live here in Palm Beach County. So very, very happy to be doing this work right here at home. As you're talking, truthfully, what all planning processes, including ours, is where are we? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? what we try and do in the first steps with the existing conditions analysis and kind of the analysis portion, research and analysis portion, is really get a firm grip on where you are. Then the needs and priorities, which we do, is really going out to the public through statistically valid surveys, focus groups, public meetings in general, to gather everybody's input. The meeting you're talking about really coming at that next step, which is the visioning, is we try and come back at what we think is the intermediary step in the middle to say, this is what we saw, researched, compared, found trends, benchmarked. This is what we heard from your constituents, from the residents of the community about what they want, and then through that visioning process, project that forward to where we need to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. The nature of Parks and Recreation is changing a great deal. You know, I've been literally doing it. 1985 was the first plan. Today, there's lots of things that are changing as you look forward to capital investments, to the programs and services you provide. It's going to be different, driven mostly by demographics and by just changes in our lifestyles in America. It's different with two people working. It isn't 1970s when, you know, the tradition was one parent at home and 3 kids and 1 car. So looking ahead right now is critical. We'd like to engage all of you in first interviews up front, on not only as from your opinion, but what you hear from your constituents. You know, that's very valid. You hear every day. You're hearing all the time. I've been in several of these meetings, and you can hear what people bring up. Pickleball, yeah, we know, it's pretty easy, dog parks. But really the trends are even more, I'd say, tidal, in that, you know, as our society ages, as people's lives change, it's important to look ahead. So we find great value, or I would believe our clients find great value in doing this at this time. It is very timely in that we're also doing ones for, you know, in the area, Palm Beach County and potentially
Which other
others.
ones are you doing? I'm sorry.
Well, right now, we've been scheduled for Palm Beach County.
Oh, the county, okay.
You're right.
Countywide, oh, good. That-
Yeah,
We'll benefit
so
from that.
dovetail together, because a lot of times,
And when is theirs happening? Not to interrupt, I'm sorry.
well, he just called me last week. We'd actually been selected 18 months ago, but they approved it. They approved it last week. So,
At the speed of government, that's what we
Move a little faster here in
very
Wellington.
patient, we're here to work with people. That one was a little longer than I thought, but, you know, I think there's lots of things that not even, and I think Eric alluded to, you know, there's also a shift in how we manage parks and partnerships and the way, you know, a village works with the county, that works with other private not-for-profit. It's getting a lot more business-like. It's a lot more efficient, I think a lot more cost-conscious than maybe it was when I started, when, very honestly, nobody ever questioned about the money. So.
Okay, so some specific questions for you, Mr. Webb. We're all talking about rec programs, and obviously we want to know if there's trends, more soccer versus more football and things like that. But does your study also analyze whether or not a community needs a passive park, for example?
Well, yeah, I would say that would be derivative of the process. I mean, if people are, we take activities drive facilities. What needs, wants, and desires, you know, could get formulated into. A lot of people come back and say, what do you do for fun? I read, I walk, I ride my bike. That would lead us to a more passive park.
Okay. How about, do you do a study or an analysis on, for example, there's been a lot of discussion in our town about golf and whether or not it's a dying sport, whether or not there's less demand for it, things of that nature. Do you also consider that in your analysis? Considering in Wellington we have multiple golf courses, some of which aren't even open at the moment.
Well, we're very aware of that trend. Yeah, I mean, hundreds close every year. I mean, it's whether it's a change in the program of golf. I mean, they're going to Top Golf, they're going to easier golf.
Yeah, but I'm not really interested in a nationwide
That's a good
trend. I'm looking specifically for
Are you
Wellington.
saying, would it cross over into private facilities, what they're doing?
I'm just curious
That's
to know
my
if he's going to
question.
factor in his park and recs analysis how golf courses are being used in Wellington, and the demand versus
I would say
resource?
more on a master plan level. I mean, because we will assess people's needs, wants, priorities, because a statistically valid survey will say 27% of people as opposed to, 88% want to do this. So we'll get a grip on it to look specifically at golf courses. We have included that in some of our studies. Some of our partners do that to great detail. We don't tend to include that in the master planning, especially unless it is to a private facility specific, because it's a lot about their operation, cutting their costs and increasing their revenues. Certainly something we could consider. It is not currently part of this master planning scope to that level of detail.
Because you're looking at public facilities for us at this point,
Primarily in your partners.
and our partners.
And I
okay.
think just to interject,
They might be partners.
right, well, to interject, I think what the basis of the study, to what we spoke to earlier, is that it's really looking at our existing facilities and tying that back to, as Mr. Webb mentioned, the needs assessment and statistically valid surveys, et cetera, and the focus groups to try and get that. Now, I think to also clarify, specifically, there is not the level of detail in this study that's going to look at any one activity and dig down to the actual numbers and detail that you would say would have if you were saying, let's do a golf study similar to what was done back in 2004. Wherein we had the National Golf Foundation come in and actually look at existing golf in the village of Wellington and whether it was viable or not, as they've done in many communities. And in some communities it is, some communities it isn't, and maybe in some cases, there's room for, maybe an 18-hole versus 36-hole facility, that kind of stuff. We're not going to touch any of that detail. But should the topic of golf come up and be a recurring theme that comes up in our needs assessment, then clearly it might be a basis for future study or further study, but it would just be considered as like, okay, here are the needs. Clearly, at this point, we have not been in the business of providing golf as a public function, but what you would consider as well, there's some private opportunity, not to mention there's a public opportunity with 36 holes just, a couple of miles down the road, east on Forest Hill Boulevard. And there's some other facilities. You would look at that in the regional context, but not at the real macro, the micro detail that you had kind of alluded to.
Okay.
And a master plan is that. It's a very high-level study at what's down here. So it's kind of a broad brush, or no?
I'll let
How mu-
Mr. Webb
how
hit
much
that first,
detail-
and then I'll-
How much detail will we get out of this?
Well, and we do try and take it down to that implementable level. In other words, to say, if, and in the end, how do we get there? Is that part of, are there policies and procedures that we would recommend changing? Is there, there's often a look at pricing structure, but more, 1 year, 5-year, 10-year capital improvement plans. Should you honestly be looking at building a golf course in the next 5 to 10 years? So we try and prioritize those big investments with long lifespans to be more carefully planned and organized. There's sometimes a lot of ways to get there, and it doesn't necessarily mean buy the land, build it, run it. Is there another way, and what are your partners or associated other places around you doing? Are you in direct competition with someone else? We sometimes see that when recreation facilities are being done. And you don't know if Weston is going to build a competing facility the year before you have one scheduled. We try and make sure that you're efficiently spending your money to the benefit of the people here.
And as a follow-up to that, in some cases, one of the recommendations might be a far more detailed facility master plan. And that's the one thing we shouldn't confuse this with. This is going to look at the broad brush, the high-level view of our facilities and our programs and make recommendations of how to implement different things going forward. But it's not going to be detailed at any one facility level. Oftentimes, that's a follow-up that then we determine based on a 5-year CIP what then comes forward.
Yeah. And if I may, and we're kind of going back and forth here, but
We could use the other microphone.
Okay.
I like keep
Then we
Okay.
can all interrupt and keep going. Very good.
and we often do that. What emerges out of it, and it could be any number of things, and then that's really identified as a clear need. And one of the things that I think was wisely done here in this RFQ is, there are we added other individuals on here as, economists and ecologists and others that if in the event that that evolves as a critical need, there's the ability to dive deeper into specific things, or a separate study that is recommended as a part of this. A golf study can be, we're using golf as an example, that can be pretty intense. I don't know if you'd want to just do it over this, or if it's actually a better. Art and culture sometimes is one that people like to look into further. So we see these things depending on the community. I mean, it's very different in each place we work. I mean, I've worked on almost 100 different master plans in my career, and they're all unique. I would expect this one, Wellington's a unique community, is going to be unique again. So we have a process, but we don't forego the solutions.
Walk me through, I read the things you're going to look at and what the scope of works and that kind of thing, but it says this is going to take a 12-month period. Give me a sense of what happens when in the 12 months.
Well, the first thing, and I'll just speak off the cuff here, but I mean, first, we do a deep dive into kind of the research and analysis. We really take a look at anything from demographics, really looking, I mean, you have a natural environment around you and how that fits in. What existing facilities do you have? You have an extensive equestrian trails plan. You don't, as far as I know, have a trails plan for people. So,
Walking?
Yeah.
We do have some walking plans, but
Okay.
they may be harder to find.
Yeah, dive into getting all those information, a base map development, all of the statistics, all of the demographic trends, and really looking at the evolution of the community and where it's going, but really then also looking at trends. We know trends in Florida, we know national trends. That isn't to preclude what we learn in the needs and priorities, but if there's kind of some shifts happening in the way sports, more multifunction. Don't preclude, lacrosse and other sports from playing. Trend was 10 years ago, you build single-use facilities, made it very hard to accommodate some of the new sports that are emerging. So,
If I don't say rugby at least once during this, my rugby friends will be mad at me, so I have to interject rugby in there, so.
rugby's another big one. Yeah, there can be a lot of different ones, but you don't want to build facilities that preclude you from accommodating them. Sometimes that was kind of the way they were done. But really this deep research and analysis, which is both spatial as well as organizational. How is the department structured? Is it truly most efficient? How are their fees and programs being charged? Sometimes we talk the pyramid model to make sure that it's being, are you delivering and are you charging appropriately comparatively? Needs and priorities is most led or probably most visible by its public aspect. We're having public meetings, we're inviting in focus groups, seniors, sports groups, users of any ilk.
On that point, are you going to meet with all of the presidents of each of the various sports, like the president of the Wellington Little League, the president of the Wellington Community Football League, things like that?
We scheduled
Soccer,
out,
basketball.
Yeah.
we scheduled out a series, and sometimes we
I have
try
to say
and
lacrosse too, I'll get in
bring
trouble.
them in together and talk as a group, rather than going to each individually. So we try and schedule them. I mean, we kind of put generally in here and discussed with Eric and Ed and Jim, just a number of meetings, and then talk about having, can we bring these groups in together? And can we have an open discussion? Sometimes people are
Sometimes
smiling.
they're
'cause
fighting for field time, so it might not be
I was
that
going
great.
to say, please
of a-
let me know what that meeting is. I really want to be there.
I've got scars from several of the sports provider meetings from years ago.
I know
We're
it
going
can
to
be
have those.
contentious, and if we need
Yeah.
to, we can split those up, but, we'd like to, promote cooperation as much as possible, because it really is important as a provider of facilities and services.
And interestingly enough, actually, Eric's staff meets with those providers on a regular basis. There's between the athletics manager and his program coordinators, they actually have assignments with various providers, and not only do they keep in touch regularly because of field requirements, needs, et cetera, based on their program agreements with us, they actually provide us information on their meetings, and we have attendance at their regularly scheduled meetings as well.
Okay, and I appreciate that, Jim, and that's an expectation of our Parks and Rec department, that they have continued relationships. But I think what I'm getting at with my comments here is that in the past, we've had buyer's remorse over some of these studies that we've asked for. And when we've gotten the report, we said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And so what I'm trying to get at here in the beginning is, let's make sure we're launching from the same platform and that we're all in agreement on what the scope of this is going to be. And from my point of view, if we don't at least make an effort to contact the individual presidents of all these leagues when this report comes out, and let's just say, for example, the baseball president wasn't consulted, they're going to say, how could this have any merit? You didn't even ask me what I thought.
I
So-
think all of staff would be crazy to not even think about that, and we have thought about it, so I'm confident that not only will we be meeting with them, I think we'll probably be overly getting into the detail of their operation, that they may not like some of the comments we give them. So, I mean, that's the kind of detail we're going to get into when we get with them, because we're going to look at field allocation, we're going to look at all their population trends of their actual usage. So, yeah, it's going to be, a full audit, and not in fiscal terms, but in actual operational terms.
I'm noticing one item on here, item number 8, recommend safe routes to parks and schools to create a connected bicycle pedestrian system, including identification of missing segments and alternatives. This could tie into other things like TPA grants, that walk to school grants that are out there. So I think this is something that we can use for other purposes along the way for funding. Am I on the right track with that?
Absolutely. I think it's a jumping off point for safe routes to school and that type of thing. So, and those are the things that having some of this information will allow us to be able to respond better to when funding opportunities come through like that from the TPA and other agencies.
And the other thing about bicycles, Councilman Napoleon, just jump in if you need to, because he's our resident biker. We're looking at, well, I'm the one on the motorcycle, he's the one on the pedals. He pedals. He pedals. I just, so, but in that, we're hearing a lot about, well, bikers want to ride abreast, do they want to take over a lane, or do they want to ride in a row and on the side of the road? I mean, is that something you'll go into in this, or?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, again, sometimes at a master plan level, getting down to a
You don't-
detailed bicycle
okay.
pedestrian plan is hard. We often do those because we're the same group that kind of does that. I mean, that was not scoped within here, but parks and recreation, bicycle, pedestrian, they're all so interconnected. It's almost impossible to look at bike ped without looking at the access, how that works.
Riding
how
your
do
bike
people
to
get
the
there? Remember,
program,
a lot of our
yeah.
constituents are under 60 or not, don't desire to drive to a park. If there's one big trend is, not taking a third of your park system and turning it into parking lots. How much can we promote people to take a healthy path to the park as opposed to always driving?
And with us, that's difficult because of our densities. So that's something we want input on. We want to hear that conversation to see where we're at with it, because, we are horribly non-walkable if you were to analyze us in a lot of regards, not just parks, but partly it's because of our density. So that'll be part of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we try and do an analysis, a true walk shed analysis and bike shed analysis as part of our original, where if you were to take, and not just taking a circle of how the crow flies, but actually taking on a route path and extrapolate how a person could access a park or how far out, that we do a series of maps to say for each of your parks, where's the walk shed? Where can people walk? Sometimes it becomes readily apparent that there is a small piece that's missing that breaks the connectivity. We've seen where parks, people can literally, and this happens a lot in Florida, see a park, but can't walk to it within a mile because of how they would have
Entry
to go
point,
out
yeah.
of their community to get to it. In some places, there's been solutions that you could actually, so whereas I'm hearing vociferously from the community, we need more parking in the park, the truth is I probably just need to provide a better route and a safer and better, and everybody really loves it much more. So we try and look at that in detail in our analysis part. Then we also compare to everything that the community expresses as their desire, and not just the community meetings, but also a statistically valid survey. So that when we really come down to, sometimes it's, the staff gets inundated, or even as, representatives inundated with those most vociferous. When you compare that to the overall population that doesn't typically come out to meetings, it's important to know what are their priorities too. So we try to really reach cross-sectional and understand, the community's wide-ranging needs, wants, and desires. Doesn't diminish that those that are actively engaged, those are our stakeholders or focus groups. That doesn't take away the importance of what they're doing, but it is good to also know that some people, who is not participating and why aren't they? So we try and learn that.
And aside from the access issue, or getting access to the parks by either bike or walking, is your report going to look at we have a proposed bike circulation plan for the bikers who want to bike in the road as opposed to the ones who are more recreational on the sidewalks with their kids. Is that going to be part of your audit? You're going to look at what we have proposed as a bike circulation plan,
Oh,
make
I
sure
would-
we're covering everything and closing gaps? Because, I mean,
We
Michael Dell
always
walked in
include
just in
those.
time for this issue.
If there's a plan together, we would definitely want to have that
Okay.
into our plan. We can point to 441. I mean, that's about as unbikeable. I don't know, maybe you do.
Still here.
I'm not.
People do, but it's amazing to me. And one unusual thing that I think you'll come across is our equestrian preserve area. A lot of 2-lane roads, not a lot of bike lanes, but also not a lot of people here in the off-season. So they get very high use in the off-season just because there's nobody around and there's lots of, open roads that, although they're 2 lanes and there's no bike lane, they still feel comfortable riding on those in our off-season. Certainly not in our season.
But they're there in the season, too. That's when it becomes dangerous.
And that's where we have
Yeah.
difficulties, right? But that's the sort of thing that you have to know Wellington to gather. So I'm hoping that we do get all this information.
Yeah.
Right, those groups would be, as part of the focus groups, both the recreational riders and the spandex lycra guys that also like to be in the travel lane and all that
But
stuff.
you might have more than one of those at the table.
Well, I hope not.
And it was interesting. I was just out at the League of Cities meeting a couple of weeks ago, and some of the people here, and to see, so much traffic on those roads, and then when you're out there in the middle of summer, not much. Yeah, it's a very unique aspect of this community. So, I was kind of going through. I don't know if you want me to go on, but it's really even a level of service. We often recommend an online survey, or what we call an online public engagement, really trying to make sure that anybody, whoever wants to give any kind of input in any type or fashion, whether they want to come to a meeting, submit something online, or respond to a survey, has the opportunity to be participatory in the process. That's critical. Then really the visioning workshop, we like to come in, at the end of that needs, and you say you're first at 2.8 Village Council presentation, first 2.7 to the Park and Rec Advisory Board. We like to make that midpoint check-in. This is what we heard. And come back, to first the Parks and Rec Board, and then to this body, or to the council, and talk specifically about what we heard. Discuss that in an open forum before we leap into the visioning, but kind of that truth check of, we are really hearing this. There is a difference between what we seem to get preponderance of in this fashion, but what, the statistically valid survey is saying this. When we benchmark you to comparative cities, here are some things. But that kind of check-in point, and then really begin the visioning process where, again, we open up to everyone, come to share their visions, look to the future of the communities, parks, recreation, open spaces. But it's that kind of mid-check-in, after we've really done our homework.
Check-in, are we talking about 6 months into this, or are we talking about
Yeah.
earlier on than that?
Well, there's still interviews up front with you. It just takes a lot of time up front to do a lot of the kind of homework. So, it really takes the homework parts. We want to come with our homework done and make sure that, we're using your time effectively. It's not that you're not early in the process, it's just the research part takes time. So it's really a critical part of the process. It's early in the decision-making. It's just when we have, our background together. So, and then certainly to engage people in the visioning. Sometimes that can be bold-looking, blue sky. We try and bring that down to reality of what really it is that we should be doing. We try and look out long-term, sometimes let people dream to the long-term, and then pull that back in priorities to, sometimes through processes say, what would you do in the next 3 years? If you only had $1 to spend, you know, where would you put it? Or $5 to spend? People get real quick about what they would do first. Visions are great, and those can sit out there. But what you're really going to do in the next 5 or 10 years, and I think as Eric said, when CAPRA, the accreditation agency, made master plans a part of the process, it wasn't punitive. It was that they were seeing that a lot of people, a lot of departments nationwide didn't really plan real well. They did a lot of things, invested a lot of money that later maybe wasn't found to be needed. So it was really that, and I think also what Ed referred to as taking people through the process. There's lots of steps, is really helpful. We tried to develop this scope with the CAPRA accreditation in mind, so that parts of that that aren't typical to the operation can be covered through this, that also fit the deliverables or the requirements of that accreditation.
I have a question. I feel like the village is really good about capturing information, gathering information. They're great planners. We do budget,
Challenges,
challenge
yeah.
online. We are constantly gathering input from our residents. How much of that will you use, or will you be starting from scratch?
Well, it's not to discount that information. I mean, we're open to all information. I mean, anything that's done, a lot of times communities do an annual survey of the residents, and so we try and incorporate that or at least compare it. I mean, for our survey, and one of the things we like to do is we have ETC Leisure Vision as our partner on the project. Often they do them for the communities, the annual surveys, being the largest in the country. So we try and sometimes we see things differently, depending on how it's asked and if we're comparing truly statistically valid versus what is random input, because there is a real preponderance in surveys towards interested groups, kind of.
Right. I was thinking you might hear that we're trying to attract a Major League Baseball team, and you might get enough people that would try to convince you of that, but that's not really what we're thinking here. So, you might get enough people that passionately get involved that get you on some rabbit
Often.
trail, right?
Often. And then when you compare it back and you see walking, biking, if you take what average, that's fine, that's good. That those other groups are very passionate about what they're doing, but not to take away from the fact that you may really want to also take a small portion of and fix your walkability in the community.
Yeah, no, you answered my question about seeing things differently, because definitely a fresh perspective can add a lot of value. So.
How do you make sure you're engaging the silent majority as opposed to the very vocal minority on these issues? Because again, like you just said, the few people who really care about things are going to make sure they talk about everything, and the people who don't really have strong opinions may not really engage. How do you engage those people?
Direct outreach is one, but the statistically valid survey will be cross-sectional exactly of the demographic of the community. And one of the things we discussed is how much do we even want to break it up? I mean, we've broken it up as much as by neighborhood and compared and contrast. For this one, from a cost standpoint, we pulled back somewhat from that. I can say I did all of Miami-Dade County a statistically valid survey, but it was broken down by 70 neighborhoods, 23 communities, 8 regions, and then the county-wide. There's differences. I don't know if Wellington has that gross of a difference, but when it's demographically exactly comparative to the area and the questions are all asked the same, and sometimes we ask the questions, really the same question 2 or 3 different ways, getting at what are the real, sometimes what we say, priority and unmet need. What's most important are those things that are not only a priority to people, but also an unmet need. Might be a real priority, but it might be met. So we try to drive that down. If there's specific outreach that we can do to groups that are not traditionally represented, we try to identify and draw them in. But to me, the most is the survey. When you can really say that it's 27% of the people in this polygon want this, as opposed to 83%, you really have a way to understand it rather than who talks loudest or who is most timid in a meeting. So
Okay.
we try and overcome that first with that baseline of the survey, and then seeing that if there's additional outreach that we have to do to get people in. And, I will say, sometimes seniors are not as vociferous as young sports groups, and I've had a whole meeting where, you'd think the whole community important thing is skateboard parks, just because 50 of them showed up.
Right. They heard about the meeting and they networked better, right?
They're much better at social media. They flooded the online survey, and come on, we're smart enough to know that that's not
So
true.
that's right. And if you see like a huge demand for skateboard parks, but yet our average age is 57 or 58, you're going to say
Exactly.
something's wrong here. Because most people at our age have figured out that's not a good idea. I'm just saying, not that
Yeah.
we don't love them and we don't have children who love them, but in the meantime, you can check for that with your statistics. I want to say one thing about this. I think we're asking a lot of questions of this because one of the unique things about Wellington is just how much we really love our recreation. And when we say recreation, we mean entertainment, we mean community. I mean, it means a lot to Wellington. So I don't want to grill you, but we want you to
Grill
know
away.
how important it really has been a key to our success as a community.
Oh,
So it's been a big part of what we do. So I want to get it right.
and let me respond. I mean, I live in Palm Beach County for a reason. I can live anywhere in the country. Why do I live here? Because I like it here. I very typically, and I seek out not all projects. I like working for lifestyle cities. Currently doing a project for San Diego. I work with Miami-Dade. We're working in our, Washington, D.C. I pick out those places that they prioritize high quality of life, because I think that is the trend, not just for recreation, but for economics, for a lot of different reasons. I believe in that whole rise of the creative class and the, what I believe is the places that are emerging.
Right. It's a
I was
quality.
really
It's a
excited
huge
about working
quality
here.
issue. Quality of life issue is huge in
It's
this.
a
so.
business attraction issue, it's a quality of life issue, it's a lot of things. Why are certain places, why do young people live in certain places and then businesses locate near them? It's a great quality of life here. I mean, there's no question. You're probably not going to compete with Alabama or Mississippi for lower taxes, but you can, I mean, it's beautiful. So all that is to say is, of course, I think we recognize the very high quality of life here. I think even our people that have heard that I'm doing this project in Wellington have spoken up. I've heard, oh my God, really? Yep. So we're very excited to be here.
Any other questions, or we can close this one out?
Well,
But
we'll
we're
do
going to
this
have
all
a
again
discussion.
tomorrow night, so.
Yeah, we're going to.
We'll try, so in preparation
do
for
that.
that.
Hope you're really
Right.
excited to be here, because you get to come back
We're
tomorrow.
going to try, rather than having the random exchange back and
Yes,
forth,
we'll
we'll
have a
try
presentation.
and summarize all the information that we discussed this afternoon into a more concise and all-encompassing presentation that we can do hopefully in less time.
We appreciate that, but we are just kind of interactive here. But I promise I won't interrupt tomorrow night. And that's hard. It's going to be hard for me, but I promise. Promise.
I'm happy. I'll be here tomorrow and,
Great.
answer any other questions.
All right. And the public will have a chance to make public comment on this by putting it on our regular agenda. So I think we might hear from people about the process that will give you even more insight. So,
More the better.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, now, where does that take us?
Okay, the next item is resolution number AC 2019-01, authorization and approval of a warranty deed between Acme Improvement District and WW Equestrian Club LLC.
So when we originally did approve the, what's it called?
Winding trail.
Winding trails, sorry. Had a little moment there. The plan was that they were going to, we were going to convey the existing lakes to them, and they would reconvey the reconfigured lakes to the village. And then after the plat was recorded, we decided that, well, it really makes more sense for them to own the lakes since they have the perpetual obligation to maintain them. And so you approved conveyance of those lakes to W&W and a flowage and storage easement back to the village. So this is just a cleanup resolution, a cleanup deed. There were some remnant parcels of lakes that didn't get conveyed that need to be conveyed over to W&W, and that's the purpose of this deed.
How did we
It's-
discover this?
Well, the property appraiser's office shows that they're still in the name of Acme. And when we went back and we looked at the legal descriptions on the deed, which were taken from the survey information that W&W's surveyor did, we realized that there were these other lakes, these other pieces of lakes that should have been included that weren't. And so that's what this is doing, is just conveying over the remnant pieces.
But again, how did we come upon this? You're telling me, well, when we looked at this and we compared that, why were we doing that at this stage?
It came up as I think part of W&W's effort to, do some of their banking and stuff like that. So it was identified by them. And we all thought that it had already been conveyed. And when they realized that it wasn't, we looked back at all of the deeds and realized that there were some remnant pieces that need to be conveyed.
And is it procedurally fine for us to do this as the Acme Board in the consent agenda to the main meeting?
Yes. You don't have to have a separate Acme meeting in order to adopt Acme resolutions. We do it all the time, with various resolutions or ordinances that we adopt. There's no requirement to conclude one meeting and then open another meeting. You have that requirement once a
I was talking
year.
about as part of the consent agenda was my issue. That's fine.
Yeah, it's not a problem. Because you're acting, as to this resolution, as the Acme Board.
And the lake maintenance easement is their obligation to maintain. We have, so.
They have-
They had that all along.
Yes, that's
Right.
on the plat. They have the perpetual obligation to maintain the lakes. And we were all under the impression that these had already, all of the lakes had been conveyed to them. And for whatever reason, these weren't included in the legal description that was attached to the initial deed.
Very well.
Okay.
Any other questions on this?
No.
It's a lot easier to see on the back when they're all tied together than the little pieces that are.
Right.
For the record, if people have questions.
That takes us to public hearings. The item under public hearings is ordinance number 2019-02, amendment to Chapter 72 entitled Mortgage Real Property Registration to provide an exemption to entities identified in 12 U.S.C. 4617A7.
So if you look at the supplement, that is the red line version of the ordinance, and on pages 4 and 5 of that document, you can see that we are just adding some language that says, except as provided in 12 U.S.C. Section 4617. We received a letter from the General Counsel for the Federal Housing Finance Authority. I sent that letter to you in a memo.
Some time ago.
Yes, and, we looked at the cases the case that they relied on. It supported their position, but there was also another case that was, in our opinion, better reason, that supported the opposite. But we don't really get a lot of revenue from that. We don't have a lot of existing Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, homes that are registered with the village. And so rather than, go to battle over something that's kind of insignificant, it just made more sense to go ahead and carve that out to the extent it applies. And the foreclosure registry does have the ability to have them identify if they are Fannie, Freddie, or one of their servicers. And that's the purpose of this ordinance.
And if in the end we see a huge negative impact, are we giving up any options here? If we decide that this has been a horrible thing for the village and we want to take that fight on, does passing this now interfere with that in any way?
No, we've made no concessions, and we can certainly always go back and revise this again. Or take the position that it's not included within that provision.
So you
And
get the
fight that battle, but I believe the number of homes is like 17 out of, it's 17 total properties.
Yeah,
It's
but the way
not,
I understand the mayor's question is, let's say tomorrow or next year, there's
right,
500.
another housing foreclosure crisis. Correct. I don't think there's anything in the language of this that would preclude us from arguing to a court that it's not, that provision of the law does not apply, and that they do have to pay the fees. They weren't really complaining about having to register, they were complaining about having to pay the fee.
They're saying they're exempted under this statute, 12 USC 4617.
Unless exempted by that statute,
And
okay?
so is our difference of opinion that there's one case that says they're not exempted by 12 USC and one that says that they are?
There's one that says they are exempt, it's out of California, and there's another case which is, I think, the better reasoned case. And these are lower courts, these are not appellate courts, they're federal courts, they're district level courts. And I think the better opinion is the one that says that they're not exempt from the fees. But again, do we want to argue over this at this point, as opposed to just putting some language in there that says,
Because we're really talking about 17 properties.
correct,
At the moment,
at the moment.
right.
But we're not precluded from taking a legal position down the road that says that, we don't believe that they're exempt under that statute. I mean,
Would we have to change this back?
no, I don't think so, because it says unless exempted. So if
Argue it's
if
not
we have a
exempt.
court, if we have a court order or court, a final judgment or some, decision of a court that says that they're not exempt, then I don't think we would have to change the language of this in any way.
This exempts them from the fee, not the registration.
Just the fee,
Okay,
correct.
okay.
And this would be first reading, so then it would come back to you for second reading.
All the questions answered?
Yep.
All right. All right.
Okay, that
next.
takes us to the final item on the agenda. On the regular agenda is request for council direction on, one, the location of the approved multipurpose fields, that the contract that was let for the Greenbrier Park. Two, the reconstruction or relocation of the competition pool. And then pending direction, authorization to award a task order for engineering, architectural, and construction manager at risk services for the project. As you will recall, we had last year awarded a contract for the construction of 4 fields with lighting, parking, and other facilities at the Greenbrier Park. We had a previous meeting, discussed with council the possibility of moving the facilities to the high school, and we had gotten direction to speak with the school district. We have done that. We are here seeking direction on how to move forward. This is the one of several versions of the plan that were done. The one thing that was not in council's direction was what we did with the pool. We did want to take a look at it to see if it's here. So what we're seeking direction is rather we move forward with the contract that we let on the Greenbrier Park, or we move forward with discussions with the school. So, and then if we do move forward with the discussions, then we would obviously need to change the contract that we have for the existing approved 4 fields at Greenbrier Park. Mr. Barnes, you can go into much more detail than I can.
Okay. So as Mr. Schofield mentioned, we were before you before with a very conceptual draft plan that we use as a basis for initial meeting with the school district, both district staff as well as Wellington High School staff. Since that time, based on the presentation to council, we subsequently met with school staff multiple times. I'd be remiss without saying that Chris Romano, assistant principal at Wellington Community High School, is here with us as well, joining us for a lovely afternoon at agenda review. And he knows more about Parks and Rec master plan than he ever cared to know right now. So I appreciate his time.
I don't think that was a waste of his time in listening.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I hope not.
But yeah, so basically, we have been working with Mr.
Better than some
Romano.
other topic we could have been talking about.
That's true. That's true. So, but we have been working with Mr. Romano on a pretty regular basis since our last presentation to council. And as Mr. Schofield said, we had gone through many iterations. Mr. Lundin and his team have been looking at it, several different ways from Sunday, trying to figure out the best kind of conceptual layout. And what you have before you right now is a configuration that we feel balances our needs with the needs of the school, which of course, being on school property, we had to consider. And also looks at the needs going forward of our sports providers and our own recreational programs. So you have in the, just to make it easy, I'll say upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, rather than trying to get directions. Upper left-hand corner, you've got 4 proposed fields at this point, and I'll get into the makeup of those and the other components of the facilities later. But you have 4 proposed fields, or one large field area, however you choose to look at it. We have basketball courts in that same vicinity, which would be new courts. Given the configuration, the existing courts are in the 4th quadrant of those fields right now, the existing basketball courts. And what you see next to those basketball courts is a proposed access drive and parking to that area for use by the patrons in that facility. Additionally, we show, just for planning purposes, both a maintenance building and a concession building, which would have restrooms with it as well, the way we typically do at any of our baseball multipurpose field quads throughout the parks in Wellington Village Park, Tiger Shark Cove, Olympia Park, and Community Park. South Shore Park now. And just for, again, for planning purposes, space-wise and all that, we have a kick wall identified. We have one of those at Village Park now. Basically, it can be all this wall ball for lacrosse practice, soccer kick practice, what have you. And so that's available there too. What you'll notice on the lower left portion of the exhibit are tennis courts. Those also, much like the basketball courts on the top part, are relocated facilities. Those tennis courts are currently located in the left corner quadrant of the 4-field facility, or actually both the left corner and the right corner quadrant, and there are tennis courts there as well. At this point, what we looked at is to try and come up with what we thought, in our opinion, would be the most effective, efficient layout, considering both layout, use of the facility, as well as sacrificing a major layout efficiency component versus a lower cost construction item like resurfacing existing courts in their current location. The one thing that all the members of the team here, both at the school and the park and engineering team, I was the lone voter that wanted to keep racquetball. And in further consultation as far as required facilities for the school, we thought that clearly from an operational standpoint, the school will agree that racquetball is a problem there based on the fact that you can't see anything through there, and while security and kind of daily operations is important. Well, that and the fact that it was tough in its existing location, and certainly something we wouldn't choose to rebuild here if there was not a need. So you don't see racquetball
Well, we certainly
remaining.
wouldn't choose to rebuild it to the exclusion of something else.
Correct. There are some, it's while I want to remain the lone racquetball holdout, I'd leave that for perhaps in Mr. Webb's analysis. We may find racquetball someplace else in Wellington.
I was going to say, we have racquetball in lots of places, right?
Correct. Oddly enough, we used to have
No,
some
we
courts
used to go
here
play
at this
here.
site.
Yeah, here.
at this location.
Right, that's right.
There was racquetball here a long, long time ago, before gym. And so that's what you've got there. As we move on further, based on the location of those proposed tennis courts, we've accommodated batting cages for existing baseball, softball.
They have batting cages now?
They do.
They do.
They
And
do.
where are they located?
It's in the vicinity of where those tennis courts are
Oh,
proposed.
okay,
Right.
so that would, okay.
Right. So moving right along to the kind of center portion of the exhibit, you've got a light green area that is the location of the existing stadium field at the high school. And in looking at our needs, and in order for us to get the maximized use of the facilities when we need them, there's a need for the stadium field to also be redone. And the basis for that is that, one, it keeps the school utilizing that field in the evenings, which is our use time, primary use time. And the added benefit is then we get an additional field for weekend use. There are going to be
To have it redone with,
so let me go and hit the
AstroTurf,
white out, the
whatever.
big elephant in the
Okay.
room. Our proposal, based on costing right now, and also, again, to maximize the use, because I'd hate to propose a facility, build a facility, and 6 months later, we're either not getting the use out of it that we need, or it's not up to the standards that the residents and customers of Wellington are accustomed to, nor is it that safe for the school to use, is we're proposing synthetic fields for these facilities, on
all of
all the
them.
facilities, that's correct.
For-
Because of the extent of the use.
if the
one thing
school's
this
going to use them during the day, and that's the question I had. When would they be accessible to the public?
The accessibility to the public, and Mr. Romano can jump in if I'm totally misspeak, but the accessibility to
He's
the public. Oh, no, I'm sure he's been ready. He was ready at 4 o'clock. Okay. The accessibility to the public is at 6 o'clock, maybe 6:15. But we're going to say that 6 o'clock witching hour is the time at which we would propose that the 4 quad fields would be public use, and by public use, they would be programmed by the village, whether it's a sports provider, whether it's our own rec program, but they would be village programmed, sponsored providers or in-house programs. And that's part of the reason we're proposing that we would do the stadium field as well, is that then that would allow them to use that field exclusively in the evenings during the week, and we would still have use of that on the weekends. Because what would happen is if that remained a natural turf field,
Be worn out?
they
There'd be no way.
they would go back to the same operating procedure they have now, which is keep as many kids off of that field.
Right.
Because it's saved for games and other types of activities, and they'd be on the fields that we would be using. So inherently, that's a problem for how we need to use the facilities. But that would be the use for the public is 6 o'clock on, Monday through Friday, weekend use. And again, just so it's full disclosure, there are going to be occasions where we have to coordinate between the school and the Parks Department as to they might have a use on a particular night that might
They have a
require something.
tournament,
And
or
similar,
they have-
right.
like we do, yeah.
And similarly, we may have something but it's going to be a collaborative process that we have now. We have it with Interlocal now, where we use the gyms and they use our field. It works well.
And this is the way it is at Olympia Park, too, right?
That's correct. And
We own the fields at Olympia.
we own the fields. Here's some differences. What you've got,
The
we've got two
property the fields
examples.
are on, okay.
Yeah, we've got two examples of something, and this is taking it to the next level. At Olympia Park, we were able to, very difficultly, but we were able to actually draw a line wherein the school built the school facilities and some parking and the gym. We built the field facilities and some parking and the restrooms and that type of thing. The lines magically happened because engineers are magicians with plats. And they own theirs, we own ours. But the use is collaborative. They use it during the day. We use it in the evening, and we have great use of their gymnasium in the evenings. A different example, but still related, is Tiger Shark Cove. The facilities on which the quad softball fields, press box, restroom facility, and multipurpose field and some parking is all school property, school-owned. However, we built all those improvements and use all those improvements. What you have is the parking, that is the park parking for nights and weekends is actually, I believe, bus and faculty area. You don't have public parking there during the day, during school use. So those are the two examples. And like I said, this takes it to the next level where we're constructing facilities on school property and there's really going to be an invisible line, if you will,
A
only.
lot of attorneys.
Oh, absolutely.
writing
Yeah, absolutely.
Documents and
I'm
making
sure
we
Ms.
actually
Cohen and
have
Mr.
use.
Littlejohn will be talking about this for a good while.
And my problem with your analogy is that Emerald Cove gym has not been as accessible to us as we expected.
It actually has. Yeah, actually, it has.
So the
Emerald Cove.
basketball situation is
No,
not true, that they've brought to me and said, we can't get basketball time?
It's actually
because-"
not Emerald Cove. It's been Polo Park,
Okay,
and which had nothing to do with the construction of. Emerald Cove, I would say, if somebody said, what's the best poster child in the county of joint use facilities, it's Emerald Cove Middle School and Olympia Park.
well, it was the basketball team that came to me and said, I
Right.
can't get time at Emerald Cove. It wasn't Polo Park.
I'd asked them to come see me today, come see Mr. Schofield,
Because they
come to
had-
this meeting right now, because
Okay.
I
Because
want
they
to
had
stay,
been-
just
well,
to.
I'll give you a little more background so that
Right.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, because I brought it to you guys when it happened. The school was able to rent the gym at a higher rate when, instead of using our
That's Polo
interlocal.
Park.
Yeah, it's Polo.
That's Polo Park.
They told me it was Emerald Cove.
Yeah, no, that's, it's
Right.
Polo Park Middle
So,
School. And again,
Not
that's.
the one we have an arrangement.
Not the one we have in our local, yeah. I mean, now, and I think we're going to make strides to be able to get there. I'm going to, go ahead and say, hey, you know what, we're probably as guilty as the school with regard to the Polo Park situation. We probably should have gotten to them a year ahead of time, told them, hey, we have a recurring need. They saw an opportunity. I'm never going to take it, I'm not going to ding the school for trying to
No,
get funding for the school. But yeah,
that's
but
what I'm
Emerald
saying.
Cove, where we have an
I
actual.
wouldn't want to enter into an agreement
Right.
where that could just happen, like when we
Right.
did pay for it, because
Yeah,
I realize
yeah.
that's separate.
Yeah, it's Polo Park.
Okay,
For
they
sure.
told me Emerald
Yeah,
Cove,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
all right.
That's why it's very important to have those meetings we're going to have at all those sports league presidents.
Barnes.
I got you.
And I haven't agreed with relocating the pool for lots of reasons, but I think as we look at the master plan and evaluating lifespan of a pool that was rebuilt in 2010, those kinds of discussions will come up in the master planning process. So it's very hard for us to decide something in a vacuum when we have all this information coming. But is the school interested in partnering with us as far as investment in this? Or is it our money on their site? Or are they willing to bring something to the table? Do we know that?
I'll answer that in two ways. One, I'll take Mr. Romano off the hook. That's something the actual school isn't addressing, but the school district. Our discussions initially with the school district would lead us to believe that they really don't have any funding to bring to the table specific to these facilities. Now, what I would suggest is that if we, again, get some kind of movement going forward with the project, and I'll hit the pool facilities in a moment when we get back to the actual layout of the site, is basically that they have projects proposed for the site that we certainly want to coordinate with, and if we have the ability to do that timing-wise, we might be able to get the better
Leverage
bang
some
for our
of
buck.
their- okay.
I think there's some improvements proposed at the stadium, not related to the field, probably not related to the track, but we certainly don't want to put down new turf field, and then they're going to come in and do some other improvements that might impact that. So I think if we coordinate, there might be a way to get a bigger bang for our buck when they do press box improvements or grandstand improvements
Sure,
and
and
that
there's
kind of
some
thing.
parking lot things at that school that are going to get done that could be
Right.
coordinated with all of this.
Right. So I think we would, assuming that we get to the next step, we would certainly, with Mr. Romano in tow, we'd go meet with Mr. Dolan, Dave Dolan, their facilities, capital improvements director, and Ms. Garrison from a planning perspective, and discuss those timing requirements. So, moving along, when you go to the lower right-hand corner of the exhibit, we have the proposed area of the aquatics facility and parking. So during the course of all these, again, like I said, we had multiple, we'll call them brainstorming sessions, kind of have the plan on the table, and it got to the point where, because you had engineers, planners, designers, and non-engineers, planners, designers, Mr. Lundin broke out a paper doll session, and we had cutouts to scale, so we could start looking at,
Which has been done for years in this process.
Absolutely. So we did that both with staff, and we did that with the school, and it yielded actually very productive results, one of which was looking at the pool at a different location, one, to maximize athletic field facilities on the upper left-hand corner of the exhibit, and an area that, because again, we've got engineering magicians working and can make things happen drainage-wise. The area which a lot of people would consider an eyesore, including Mr. Romano.
You mean the dry detention area that's
right.
not dry?
Right. That I think between some additional drainage on the site, as well as some credit that the village also has with the
That
water
we would
management.
drain- We would drain it better ourselves.
That would allow us to put some facilities along the frontage, and I think from a school perspective, again, not to speak for the school, but we've been very close in the last few weeks, that it's a better location, also addressing a lot of council concerns for security and
Right,
that kind of thing.
public access,
Right. I think
Daytime access.
daytime
Exactly,
access,
'cause
because
That's the key.
The original plan calling for it to go up in the upper left-hand corner, I thought was a bad idea. It wasn't
Yeah.
going to work, but this is a lot easier for the residents during the day to get in and out if they want to use that pool. in
Right,
this
and I-
location.
Completely sequester off from the school in large
Yeah,
measure.
yeah.
Right. And I think the thought was if they saw anybody on school grounds in a bathing suit, they would know, hey, you don't belong here. I think that's a paraphrase, right? That's close. All right, just checking.
You didn't use Speedo? You didn't say the
No, I said bathing suit, but if you want to go there, I'm prepared. So that's,
Him he is.
so that's what we're looking at, and basically it takes advantage, that aquatics facility, again, very preliminary layout, looking at existing configuration of the current facility sizes, building sizes, that kind of thing. Takes into account existing parking that's there.
That's the student parking.
yeah.
Yeah, student parking. So what happens is, what we lose in some of that student parking immediately adjacent to the facility, you'll notice some additional parking on the perimeter of the student parking as well, that offsets what's lost. I think actually makes up for more than what's lost. That's correct. That's correct. So that's what's proposed there, where we think that we're not negatively impacting the existing student parking with the new facility. And again, a critical component of any of these improvements is the appropriate fencing and circulation, both during school activities and even on weekends, to protect the school physical plant that remains unusable to the public. The last thing I think that I'll address is, so related to the overall layout, one thing that we continue to work on, and I think will be a dynamic process rather than static once until we finally decide here's the final plan, is we continue to work with the school staff, both Mr. Romano and Ms. Hayden, to develop an alternative that helps them address the student drop-off, parent drive-through scenario, which to some extent, we're looking at different solutions to that, including accommodating, maybe bus drop-off someplace else. That's an evolving process that we think we can come up with different solutions, but we certainly, ultimately, the final sign-off on some of that, assuming it's certainly within the cost, because, as we all used to remember, the previous engineer said, hey, time and money, we can solve anything. There's some limitations here with that, but operationally, we're going to rely on the school to say this works for us or it doesn't. And then secondarily, because that type of circulation issue won't really be an impact for our Parks and Rec use. It's really a school issue, but if we can accommodate something, that's where we certainly want to work with them to do that.
Well, my concern would be the length of our ability, the time of our ability. I want to make sure that if we were going to invest in this much turf and asphalt.
That we get enough access to it to justify it.
Right, because, and I'd want to know what the district was willing to say. If it's 15 years, is it 30 years,
Right.
Is it 10 minutes? I want to know the long-term.
Yeah, the interlocal would have to run for a
Right.
decent amount of time.
Yeah,
Can't
so
just do 5
here's
or 10 years.
Here's some preliminary comments on interlocal. One, it's very preliminary.
Right.
And Ms. Cohn will certainly dig into the details of that with their legal staff after the planning staff and our staff kind of take a first crack at it. But right now, while there's, the the main duration that's in there, I believe, is a 29-year, it's a 30-year time frame that's in there, which certainly is beyond the life of the turf, but I would say not beyond the life of a lot of the improvements we're doing, that we would go back and forth with them. We think 30 probably needs to be longer. I think, and I think really it's going to be a long-term partnership with the school district that we'd be looking for. Certainly, we've been here, and Wellington High School's been here for a long time,
Right,
as evidenced
and
by
they-
some, and we've continued to work. Yeah, it's been a great relationship. They
So-
use us as an example for the rest of the county, so we want to use that as a jumping off point and say, well, we should be able to demonstrate that it can be a longer relationship. The details as far as, the legalities and all that, we're going to leave that to the attorneys, but the usage portion of it, I think, in order to try and meet our timeframes, they put together what was their basic interlocal agreement, and then we're just going to refine that.
Excluding the pool, what would be your cost estimate for everything else up there?
Excluding the pool, it's probably about $10 million.
Which is coming from the penny sales tax.
That's correct.
I mean, that needs to be very, very clear
And
to
that's
the public.
cheaper
This has
than
already been paid
Greenbrier
for.
That's
project
correct.
originally with
That's correct. Our original
better
estimate
fields.
for Greenbrier was about 12 million. What we're seeing here, and of course, again, just to, want to make sure we've got cost estimate based on this exhibit. Those cost estimates will be refined and go in greater
Right,
detail.
and I know I'm asking
Right, but
you
no,
very
but yeah,
preliminary.
yeah, so, but-
We're talking about a lot of money.
But we feel
and-
comfortable with that.
And we don't know if the district, when we say the penny sales tax, that's part of, the district got a half cent and we got a quarter of a cent, or not a quarter, but we got
piece of
even.
a quarter.
A piece of a quarter, and they've got half. So, again, I'd like to see them bring something to the table for the use they'll get.
So-
So let me clarify on the comparison between the proposed athletic facilities, field facilities, and Greenbrier. I think what we're seeing is we're able to offset costs here that, automatically we're thinking, okay, wait a minute, I thought synthetic turf was a lot more expensive. It is, but really it's becoming to the point where it's not. It's not the novelty that it was 10 years ago, it's 15 years ago. It's becoming more in use.
Got a better
More
price
and more,
point.
yeah.
And the maintenance on it.
It's getting better,
My
the
concern
material.
about this is the drainage. I mean, we're covering a lot of land that is now grass. Have the engineers looked at that? I mean, the drainage is getting tough when you've got so much impervious. And turf fields are pervious or impervious?
Well, I think they're relooked at as impervious.
They're looked at impervious, so you got a lot of runoff from this. So again, this is like kind of constrained a lot for drainage from the overall view. But I wouldn't want to commit on the pool only because I want to know, the amount we spent on it, the time frame we should be using that pool before we just give it up and
Right.
build another
But
one.
Mr. Barnes, what are we discussing today?
Right,
We're not
so-
talking about committing. Aren't we talking about going forward? Walk us through that.
So let me back up for a moment. Going back to the interlocal agreement. So the interlocal agreement will allow us the ability to do everything you see on the plan. However, there's not a commitment to do anything on the plan, if that makes sense. We have the ability, but not the obligation to do anything on there, okay? That's our structure. In that, so if we choose, okay,
We wrote that.
right, you like that? But that's going to be the concept of any interlocal in that, should we choose to move forward now with the fields, we move forward with the fields, but it doesn't, we're not obligated to
Doesn't mean
move
we
forward
have
with the
to
pool.
do everything.
Nor are we precluded from moving forward.
Correct. What it does is that literally gives
Because
us.
it's going to take time to get all this done
It's going to be
anyway.
done in stages
It gives us the
anyway.
maximum flexibility to really do any and all of those improvements
Okay.
on there, okay?
And
And-
the
go ahead.
significant thing that I see on this that they've been asking for a long time is that stadium field and turf. Because, there's people up north in Jupiter had done that particular project with their high school, and all I hear is, they did it up there, why can't we do it? And I'm like, well, we've got more than one high school. I don't want to get into that conversation down the road, because Palm Beach Central, if we're doing a significant investment in Wellington High, I can guarantee you that the other high school in Wellington is going to want to be part of the conversation.
But the difference is that we're getting all of this land. I mean, all of this that we were normally going to have to commit Greenbrier to, we now are able to maximize and put on a piece of property that we didn't think we normally would have had. I mean, that's the key to this
No,
whole thing for me.
I agree with that, but looking at it from their viewpoint, do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but
if-
Central doesn't have anything to offer us. They don't have any land that we can build community fields on, which
Because I
is,
asked that same question. I'm like, well, isn't Palm Beach Central to get upset that we're giving a new field to Wellington High and they're not getting anything
I
out of
can
the field?
guarantee you that they would want a turf field that they could get more use out of, and we could use the turf field, which we're talking about here also. So, I mean, while they might not have vacant property or something that they're willing to, and we don't even know how willing, this high school is throughout the process. This is the starting
Correct.
point.
Correct. At this point,
they
at this
ever
point,
like their
we're just,
baseball fields?
we're swiping right. This is
Right.
just the
But-
beginning of the dating process, okay? We haven't decided if we're going to keep.
That was
we're gonna
really,
keep-
that was,
Okay, we're swiping
was
right on this.
really-
Well, it's Valentine's Day week, just throwing this out there.
Eric and Ed could not believe that you just made that reference.
I'm just saying.
Normally,
I don't know
we're
what he's
gonna
talking
let
about, by the way.
These conversations take whichever path they're going down, but we're gonna need, here's where we sit. We do not need direction on the pool tomorrow, we don't need it next month. But what I do really need to get some direction on is rather we move forward with Greenbrier or we come to this site. Because the contracts on Greenbrier have been left. If we're going to move forward with this, I need to reject those bids and start, or make arrangements with the contractor, because we can do that, move them here. But I do need to know if we're going to move forward with Greenbrier, if we're going to do this one, what we're going to do. The pool can be another part of a discussion for another day.
Well, it's going to be included in the agreement, though, regardless.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
was an option that we can exercise
That's
if
right.
we choose in the future to do so.
Correct.
But for me,
So
what
there'll
I'm
be no
hearing,
renegotiating. I mean, this will all be in the one,
In a local agreement.
We don't want to have two separate discussions, once something's either built or not built. It's just, we lay out the basis for doing it all now, and then we make the decisions in the parts that council's comfortable with.
and these would be hard tennis courts, concrete tennis courts?
Correct.
Asphalt.
When would they be accessible? What times of the day?
For,
tennis
you're talking
courts.
about the tennis courts? Similar to their tennis courts now, they're accessible in the evening. I don't believe anybody would use them based on the condition they're in.
does Wellington High have a tennis
But
team?
they haven't been
They do?
accessible for years. on this.
Actually, and Mr. Rana can jump in now if he wants to, but I can handle this one too.
Because I've tried
this
to get
goes
in there
back.
and you can't get in there.
Yeah, you can, actually, oddly enough.
But the condition is not.
Correct. That's the biggest thing, because we use it for basketball, and the basketball courts are right by the tennis courts.
Right.
So basically, at nights, that back area is open, and our guys use it for basketball, for
So
practice.
you have to have the secret.
No,
code
it's
or-
open.
No,
we
you have
have
to,
had-
because we've tried to get in. We couldn't get it. It's been a few years now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably been,
It was right around the same time when we had the racquetball issue.
right.
Right, no, and that was the problem before, because again, it's, and that goes back, we're
And I'm
going
like,
back.
we have it in our local, we'll allowed to
Right.
use these, and nope, it's locked.
Yeah,
And there
that
was
goes
no
back a
access.
couple of principles ago before Mr. Corsetti, where we had a principal issue, and we had issues with a specific racquetball group and all that. But since that time,
It wasn't the Deacons, was it? Because that's what Alan's group was called. The church
No,
guys were
not at
all
all.
out playing racquetball, and we got thrown out. We're like, but they're the Deacons.
Anyone who has.
Got a microphone.
Come on up. Bring a chair.
Roll it up right next,
There you go.
next to,
I tried.
Thank you. Anyone who has come to me with an interlocal has been able to use that. Any one of our facilities. Since I've been there in 5 years, they've never been denied.
This was before
Right.
5
Right.
years ago,
Yeah.
but in
Correct.
the meantime, anyone who comes to you, if we have village residents who want to play tennis, I mean, they come to us, not you, right?
Right,
How
and
does this work?
here's the deal. Generally speaking, while somebody may decide, I'm just going to go on the school property, if you're there after 3:30, or after 4, first person that gets a call is going to be this gentleman right here. If somebody says, hey, what's
Not
this?
open play, it's our programmed play.
Well,
Not open play, not just people coming up to play.
But it
like
could
we
be
used to
open
do.
play if we had
Correct.
anybody approach us and say, hey, we need a place to go play racquetball. Oddly enough, we haven't had that request.
but we're talking about, let's talk about this, the tennis courts. The mayor and I want to
So
play
going
tennis
future?
at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday.
No,
But
see,
we're not part of your programming, we just
Right,
want to
right.
go.
No, so
'cause
here's-
I have a
here's what we're going to do.
I
Just-
played pickleball with her, it's something.
Right, and you guys want to improve the
Right,
game and everything,
right.
absolutely. So what we would see happening here is similar, once these, let's say we build those facilities, it's a great relationship and things are going great. At 6 o'clock, that space will be programmed by the Village of Wellington, with the exception of the stadium field.
Including, but are the tennis courts going to be programmed, or are they just going to be there?
Well, when I say programmed, it's going to be available for use. Unless all of a sudden I've got an asphalt tennis court program, it'll be open play.
Okay.
Just like the
Right, so
basketball courts
And that's
won't.
the part that's missing is the open play aspect.
So
Right.
at 7 o'clock,
Right.
provided that 16
said
other
aspect.
people don't have the same idea as the mayor and I, we can go at 7 o'clock. on Wednesday.
Absolutely.
One of the differences that will happen between now and then is if we do this, then there will be Village of Wellington employees there on site to be able to deal with that. That is not something we have today.
I think that's a big improvement.
So-
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Right, and right now, the only asphalt courts we have available, oddly enough, is also on school property at Emerald Cove Middle School.
I thought those were on our property and the parking was on school property.
No, the tennis courts are
Sure,
actually
but in
on.
that regard,
on-
they're almost right
on
next to the
school
tennis
property.
center. So that, I mean,
They're on school property.
On school, so those are, but they're ours.
They're community use, that basically we can't use them during the day.
Right.
I can't send anybody there during the school day, but after school, those are for our use. We actually improve those and put some lighting nearby. We also put some lighting near the sand volleyball court that's there, as well as the basketball courts.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's interesting. Again, we've got this recreation master plan idea heading our way, but I think we should know if they're willing to invest any of this with us or nothing. And to make sure, even the stadium field would be available to us on certain times,
Stadium field will be available to us on the weekends, absolutely.
except for Friday nights.
Friday
or-
night, yeah, right,
Or if
Saturday,
they
Sunday.
you're
have,
talking about Saturday, Sunday.
Saturday, Sunday, that increases our field availability by another field out of 4 to 5. So I mean, that's
Sure,
big.
and that field could then be, I mean, those are not the same size, right? It would be divided, it might be two fields. I mean, we could program it in a way that,
I know it's an optical illusion.
It's the same
But
size
all
as
5
others,
fields are
yeah.
the same size.
Okay.
What you have on the stadium field is maybe some ancillary side areas and back areas that we would also look to maximize by moving some of the track improvements off the field.
But the recreational master plan aside, we've already decided we need more fields.
green-
That's why we were
correct.
going to do Greenbrier.
so we're back to, but aren't we back to Paul's point here then? You're getting
Right,
there. Go
but
ahead.
we decided we need 4 more fields at least, and this gets us 4 more fields and
Plus
still
one.
plus 1, and still preserves Greenbrier for later future use, and we get tennis courts and we get basketball courts that are open to our residents on a fairly
And the
open
option for the
basis.
pool if we go
And
for
the
it.
option to do more if we want to really go with the pool issue, but it really creates a lot more open activity space for our residents while still keeping Greenbrier for future use for whatever that may be, which we know is going to be hurricane debris occasionally. And it gets us better fields.
And any number of other things that might come.
And it's better fields. It's not, because Greenbrier was going to be grass fields. This is going to be the artificial turf, which has better life and better usage. So, okay,
And no drainage, and Greenbrier drains.
right.
I mean, so
Well, I
again,
think our engineers can find ways to make the water go to the canals that are next to the property.
It's around the whole
that-
property.
Yeah, but they're not really allowed to do it just that way.
We're going to build code
Right.
compliant facilities.
Right.
I can assure you of that.
Right, but
Okay, well, I mean, this
That's all
this
we're
seems
saying.
like a no-brainer to me.
They're like everybody else. If we do this, they will require permits outside of the Village of Wellington, and we will meet every requirement.
Right.
On it, whether it's here or anywhere else, we will meet all the requirements of the South Florida Water Management District and the DEP and everybody else we have to get permits from.
Correct.
And again,
As we
while
should.
this is all
Yes.
great, the key comes down to how long that interlocal is going to be. 'Cause It's
Right.
got to be a
Right.
sufficiently long time that we get our investment back from this,
Right.
from building this on
And
someone
let's
else's
keep in mind,
property.
if we're talking about 30 years and working up from there, I want to point out that this site has been used for 28 years.
Right.
That is the current life cycle of the entire thing.
But I do like the mayor's point about addressing the school board and asking them, are they going to kick in some money as well? Because they stand to gain by this. And if it's not on the fields, are they going to spend a little bit more of the penny sales tax on Wellington High School and Palm Beach Central needed improvements? Whether that's security improvements or whatnot.
Yeah, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe this project will impact anything the school district is doing at either of these schools or anything else. Only because I think, you know, unfortunately, and I don't want to speak for them, but we'll certainly go back to the impression at our initial meetings with the district staff is that, you know, they've got their penny sales tax laid out for the
Yeah.
next, till it's spent.
Their contribution here is the land. I mean, that
Correct.
is,
Correct.
But it doesn't hurt to ask, is all I'm
No,
saying.
and I think, like I said, Mr. Schofield's pretty direct, and he pretty much came forward after he elbowed me when I committed to more facilities, and he said, you just spent another $1 million. They pretty much, they've got their allocation spent, or, identified and all that, and really, yeah, they're coming to the table with land. And unfortunately, I mean, Mr. Romano will confirm this, is that, if we didn't do this project at all, those kids would be using those same grass weed fields for practice.
Right.
And he'd be making sure that he kept all those practices off of the stadium field, because the football coach is the one maintaining the football field, just like he did when he was the football coach. So you're going to see what's there. Now, the one thing is, as we know, I can't give you the exact percentage, but the majority of the kids at this school are Wellington residents, are Wellington kids. So it's still, I mean, I think this is the really ultimate personal perspective, professional opinion. This is your biggest bang for your buck, because we're going to build facilities that are going to be used from the morning till the night. Right now, if we build a park at Greenbrier, that park is rarely going to be used during the day, and if it is, it's going to be minimal. And most of the use is nights and weekends. So here, we're really getting the biggest bang for our buck.
And as I understand it, you can build these for cheaper here than you could at Greenbrier.
Well, yeah, that's the 10 million versus the 12 initially, and I think the offset is that Greenbrier was greenfield construction. We're running utilities,
Right.
brand new drainage. Here, you've got existing
Infrastructure.
systems.
Right.
So, and that's the offset. And the fact that, because the fields that our customers, our residents, our kids have grown accustomed to playing on are a higher level, our natural grass fields are almost the same cost, if not the same cost, as synthetic fields. And the offset here is you get more, really no downtime
use
because of
time.
weather.
Yeah.
If it pours rain, it's going to drain, because it's going to be permitted correctly. It's going to drain, and it's going to be playable almost immediately, as opposed to some of our fields. If we get
You can't play on them for weeks sometimes if it
yeah, no,
rains
we got a gully washer, and it's going to be
Yeah,
And
I
you
think-
get a fifth field, and you get basketball, and you get tennis.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
I think this is a
Improved,
win-win.
because, I mean, the current facilities, we use basketball, but it's not great, and tennis is really unusable. I think Mr. Romano's confirmed those courts aren't even really in use by the school team, because
So I
they
shouldn't
play
try
their
now
games
that
at
I
our
know.
facility.
I was going to say, where does their school team practice?
They play at the tennis center.
Really? I mean, yeah.
So they
More of a better
may
deal
not, well, they may not want to do it, because playing on asphalt is completely different from playing on.
And I
clay.
think what it is
So
they
may not want-
they still play certain,
Right,
there's still
you
a
do
requirement.
paddle tennis and.
Well, there's a requirement at certain age groups that you have to play certain games on asphalt courts.
Okay.
Yeah, for youth, high school and even youth, there's some requirements that, doesn't have you playing on the hard true surface. So there is a requirement here, and the reason we went with 8 is to try and keep the parity for girls and boys teams, men's and ladies teams.
Well, I think we should go into this wide open, with access being the main question, and length, the length of the time. And I think if we're going to do this, I would want to make sure that, because the school district has their own sets of standards and their own vendors, that we would be able to use our.
We actually, that's one thing I can answer. We addressed that with Ms. Garrison up front and Mr. Dolan when we had our first meeting with them. And one, they agreed that if we chose to, we could permit this ourselves through us rather than through the school district.
Okay, which is
So, and
huge.
that would be our preference. And two, that this would be handled basically as a village project. So we would follow our procurement,
Okay.
our rules, our requirements, our process, the whole thing. They're basically going to be a review agency, and that would be the process. As far as access, I think the guys who are going to be looking at access are, at the table, and we're pretty much, the reason you have the layout you have here, the field components, the facility components, is access for those fields is Monday through Friday, the 4 quad up top, 6 o'clock on. We're not going to have access to the stadium field Monday through Friday, because what would happen is, given that it's a synthetic turf field, they would be able to actually utilize that for practices. That
Which they
doesn't
can't do
preclude.
now. They practice on the grass, and then
Right.
they go to the stadium,
Right.
right,
Right,
to
and-
maintain it.
and,
So-
and that would not preclude Mr. Romano and Mr. Juckett from having, as part of our interlocal agreement, the ability to, over the course of the year, should Parks and Rec need anything, should the school district, Wellington High School need anything, to coordinate a schedule modification. We do that now through all our facilities. It's no different. And the aquatics facility, the game plan there would be, should we move forward with something like that, that would be available and accessible day, night, typical hours that we have
Yeah, if
now.
we're
the way
gonna
that it's
man it.
situated.
Correct.
If we're going to man it. it has
Right,
to be-
right.
yeah.
And again, we would coordinate the way we do now for the high school swim team, swim meets, et cetera, but it'd be no different than how we operate today.
And that wouldn't impact anything while the school is open because of its location.
Right, okay.
So I have one more question. I just heard you say that we could use the fields Monday through Friday, 6 PM on. What about Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday, Sunday, that goes without, yeah,
Okay,
Saturday and Sunday, again, outside of those special
Sunday,
circumstances, the whole site.
Summers. Well, summers, you have summer school.
Well, summers,
So we
they have some things going on, so that would require the coordination.
We'd be
I
able
would
to work that out.
Yeah.
Summer
'cause-
school is
'cause-
modified hours, there's a whole
Correct.
different.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're not at the same school each year.
Yep.
That would be something we could work out with the
I
coaches.
think we should look into it. Again, I'm not, I don't think we've gotten our useful life out of our investment in the pool, so
Right.
I like the fact that we can take pieces, but if we do this for the benefit of them, I mean, it is their land, and it is, I want to start with the stadium field, because that's been the one
Well,
thing.
That's, I know, we're killing it here, but I got a lot of time left. So on the stadium field, we had this, I got special.
Your colleagues are not
We're
in
getting
agreement.
ready to get the hook.
I got special dispensation from my wife. So basically, as
So personal, I can't believe you just told,
no,
shared
no,
that
well,
with us.
Mr. Schofield didn't, so I'm going to. So basically, what we've got is,
That was great.
as far as the where were we? Jeez,
Where are we
had so
going to
many
start?
things.
I said
Thank you.
start at the stadium field, because that's the
Yeah,
main
we've actually had
benefit
that
to the
discussion
school.
again, because the guys that are going to affect the actual sequencing of this are at the table. We have to start
We
there,
have
and it
to
would be a
start there.
phased project because,
couldn't
Because
do
if we're
the
going to go into
others.
construction, the other place where they would have practiced, that's got to get done
Right.
so that they could.
right, so the stadium field would have to start there, which would be good to sit down with the school district staff to figure out the coincident timing of their improvements in that area.
And it's so tough.
And the other thing, just as to wrap up, because I'm going to get the hook, is the last item, the four-part item, is actually the authorization to move forward with two task orders, one for Kimley Horn and Associates for approximately $15,000, and one for Kaufman Lynn for approximately $10,000, and the numbers are not specific.
Right, and without those, we're not able to get the site planning
finalize.
done and the detailed cost estimate. So
And-
we need to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that's.
obvious. Yeah. Got it.
So if we tomorrow night decide on it this way, we would give you recommendation of which site we want to move forward on,
Yes.
Greenbrier, or move forward with the
Move forward.
discussion
Correct.
so that they can
Understand that
get.
with any contract, right up until we bring you the contract to tell the contractor to start to build, you know, you have the outs up to that point on any contract, right up until we say go build it.
Okay.
Very good, Mr. Barnes.
Good
I want to
good
say,
presentation.
I want to say,
Little long,
Mr.
good
Barnes,
presentation.
the whole team, Mr. Lundin, this is,
Oh, they did all the work.
from where, I mean, this
That's-
is.
They did all the work. And Mr. Romano and Mr. Lundin kind of sat there and did more paper doll work. Mr. Juckett is really
We
good at
did it
moving
that
this.
way for
field.
years,
I'm
and
telling you,
it
it's a
functioned.
beautiful
I
thing. It
mean-
worked great. It worked great.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Is that the end of our agenda then?
We are.
Ms. Cohen's moving the microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you. The complaint for foreclosure has been filed against Palm Beach Polo, Inc., and it has been assigned to Judge Rowe, and we identified a number of parcels that we have included in the complaint. And so I just wanted to let you know.
And Judge Rowe has familiarity with this, having handled the
She does.
underlying litigation.
She
Or
does.
at least a portion of it.
The enforcement and also the permit case.
Okay.
So, yes, she's not unfamiliar with Palm Beach Polo, the Village of Wellington, the location
Or with Big, I
of.
mean, the whole thing.
Right, exactly, correct.
And who's handling that legally for us?
Jonathan Chain.
Who's that?
He's an attorney, he's a local attorney who has experience with commercial foreclosures. And, I think that there's going to be a lot of litigation, back and forth, and probably a lot of motion practice
And the
on this case.
expertise in this
Agreed.
is pretty unique, correct?
Yeah, he's
The
a good lawyer.
foreclosure.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing in this
Yeah.
area.
And he drafted a very, very nice complaint, and we had a title search done. There's no liens on the property, any of the properties, and so, other than ours.
So it's been filed, has it been served?
I don't know whether it's been served yet, but it has been filed. And I wouldn't see any reason why there would be any kind of delay in service. So, but we didn't rush service or anything.
Right.
Right,
No,
so
no,
just
right,
make
right.
sure we get proper service.
Okay.
Okay.
Very well.
Thank you. I have one item I wanted to bring up. It's about the Achilles Spinelli grant, the remaining
I've got the
70,000.
request from, and I'll start routing the things through for, you get an AT on that probably in the next day or so.
Okay,
I'll start sending that through the process.
okay.
For a
Well, the
specific-
remaining 70 that was budgeted but wasn't allocated, and a couple of the principals have contacted me and sent emails about when can they expect
Could
that.
you share those emails, or?
It was sent to
I
Paulette
got-
Edwards.
I got a email from,
Blake, Ms. Bennett.
yeah. So I will get those out to you. I've been,
No, I didn't receive those.
no, it
Okay.
came to me,
Okay.
and it was late last week. So,
So anyway, they just are wondering when that might be allocated, and I think it's just a matter of, it's already budgeted, so.
no, it's like any other thing that's budgeted, if it's just, it's in the budget, it still has to come to council for approval.
Right, right,
So I have,
Just like we did it last year, it was a two-part thing. There was
Yeah.
right.
But we gave the remainder, and in all fairness or transparency, it wasn't presented why the additional funds were put in there. They were just budgeted in there
Yeah.
and put in there. And then it was never explained why more money was put in there than we anticipated using. So I didn't like the way that worked out, because I saw it and I thought, well, there must be some reason that we're putting more money in here than we are planning on giving out. And it wasn't explained to me until 2 years later that there was an idea that we might use it for some kind of summer program. And I would just prefer, if you're going to ask money to be put in a budget, that we know why and what it was for. And I'll just say, we have a lot of schools, so the last time we had leftover money in there, we divided it evenly amongst all the schools. That seems to me to be a fair way.
What's that? And
Well, I
isn't that
found-
what we're talking about doing?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we voted to increase the grant.
Right, I thought we did
and
too.
The summer camp doesn't really.
we
I
had-
guess by
do with
passing the
this.
So
budget,
there was,
I
there
guess
was an
by
extra
passing the budget, we did that.
70,000 put
But
in
we
that
agreed
wasn't
to do
allocated in
was
those.
The allocation was about $330,000, the budget line item was 400, so there's 70 in there, and the year before that happened, it was distributed, so I've got to get all the
And they
information
were,
to you.
it was distributed at the beginning instead of the end, which was kind of nice, because
Because that's when they need it. Because they
That's when
can't
they
hit the
needed
ground
it.
running until they get their money in October.
I agree with that,
So
but
that's-
some of them are requesting it now versus, I mean, I think we should allocate it if we can,
And let them
because
go
then
back
let
to
them
the
decide.
education committee and make their pitch and get it.
If they would like to hold on to it as a startup for next year, but some of them need funding for things now, so let them make that decision, is my
So
thought.
Yeah, and I got that late last week, and I will
well,
get
none
that.
of that's been provided
Right,
to
it
me,
hasn't been,
so,
and
okay.
Or to anyone else.
no, it hasn't been. None of you have seen it from me yet. I got it last week.
Okay.
And I will get it to you, I promise.
All right.
I only saw it because I was CC'd on the
'Cause, you
email.
know
but-
me, I like to both talk and send you a lot of paper.
But it didn't come to your village email, or we would have seen it?
No, she CC'd
Okay.
my
It
personal.
came, what I got came to me
Okay.
through my email account as me, and that's not something you all would see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to let you have it. You get about 500, 600 of them a day.
No, thank you.
No, I only need to know basis, and now we need to know, so thank you.
I have one other quick issue I need to bring up. Well, not quick, but Ms. Cohen, when is your contract scheduled to expire?
In April?
In April. Okay.
And we're in
I
February.
think
okay.
maybe not tonight, but maybe tomorrow, we need to start talking about appointing somebody to renegotiate that contract, and we need to leave at least a month time frame for time to do it, so.
So by the second meeting of this month.
I think it's probably my turn, in fairness. I think you guys have both done it before. I think I'm next.
Okay.
So I'll
And
volunteer.
I did the first
I didn't want to put you on
one.
the spot.
I know,
Mike.
I think, just timing-wise, I think I'm due, and I'll volunteer to do that.
I'll say we never were distributed the questionnaires, evaluations. Were those all completed?
I believe so.
I don't have them, but I'll get them to you.
They have been completed, but I think there was a request for a meeting, and I didn't know if that'd been completed or not, but Ms. Newman has them.
Request for what meeting?
That was me. I made a request that I wanted to meet with both of them before we had public comment on them. I did meet with Mr. Schofield, but I have not had a chance to meet with Ms. Cohen. But I don't want that to hold up the process.
Typically, we just give them to you, and they've been.
Yeah, they're
we haven't
usually
been doing
distributed,
public
and
comments
it
on them.
just hasn't
So we'll get them to you.
gotten out. Okay.
Probably tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it tonight, I can tell you that.
No, 6 o'clock.
We are going to meet tomorrow.
Is that-
I need to reschedule that, and let me explain.
Can you explain that later?
You don't have to.
Yeah.
Explain that later.
Yes.
Take us off the air, please,
Anything
we're
else?
done.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
And we're going to meet